been copied, has been extracted out, and some manipulations have been done. After manipulating it, it is pasted back to the image, planted back to the same portion. Your algorithm can do it for you, the exact portion to be found out and placed it back. In the process, what happens, if this is the attack, some kind of modification attack, in the process what happens, because this was stored in JPEG format, the two portions quality factor differs. QF stands for quality factor, okay, or compression ratio, many times we call it. So this quality factor of these two regions now in the output image, they differ, which you cannot make out from with your naked eyes, right? With bare eyes, people cannot detect it. They cannot perceive it. So we need some forensic measures to identify. In one of our recent works, what we did is a simple manipulation. We took this image, let us say I. This is the image that you are having now. You don't have access to this or this. You don't know that some attack has been there. So what you have is only this output image. So in one of our recent papers, which has been published, um, what we did is we took this image and we quantized it or compressed it at some other quality factor, at any quality factor. We don't know the value of x. X can be equal to 1, x can be equal to 2, x can be anything apart from 1 or 2. It does not matter what quality factor we are using, but we are using a certain quality factor. So we are basically taking this image and compressing it and subtracting the compressed version from I. And what we saw is that these regions came from the authentic portion, right? So they have turned black. Why? Because the value is 0. If the pixel value is 0, it is black. It appears black. If the pixel value is 100, it appears white. Not 100, it is basically 256, 255, right? If it is a 8-bit image, the range of pixels is 0 to 255. So this means black and this means complete white. So because this region came from the original image from here, it had turned 0. Whereas gradually a small whitish dotted pattern started coming up. To view it even more clearly, we raised this difference to the power 2, 3, 4, and it started getting clearer and clearer and clearer as we kept on increasing this exponential. What I have shown on this slide are the results of our experiment with this exponent value 10. When we raised this difference to the power 10, very clearly it was evident that in this region, some malicious activity has gone on. Right. So we were talking about some modifications without any hash or fingerprint embedded, completely based on post-processing, we were able to detect it, given that the image is stored in JPEG format. We have exploited the steps of JPEG algorithm. We have exploited the working or operation of JPEG algorithm. Due to this quantization or compression, we were successful in achieving this kind of a result. Right. However, the open problem here is reconstruction. Although we could detect that some malicious activity has been there here in this region of the image, we are not yet able to reconstruct the image back. What was the previous quality factor? It is tough to find, challenging to find out, even today, till date. We are working on it, and it is an open problem to work on. right? So this is yet another forensic problem, the third one. The final one, the final problem that we are going to talk about in this lecture is the forensic problem of source identification. Okay. On the left, you can see there are three pistols. This is one scenario, right? Again, going back to crime scene analysis by the police department, what their forensic team does. Suppose there has been a crime, there has been a murder, and at the spot, a bullet has been found. And there are three suspects holding these three pistols or revolvers. How does the police go for proving that who out of these three suspects is the actual culprit? They are suspects. One out of them is the culprit, right, or the criminal. So how will they go for proving it? Speaking at a very naive level, what they will do, because their intricacies of work we are not acquainted with, but this much all of us have an idea that the scratch marks, the bullet marks that are left behind in the body, they will analyze, and those marks they will try to map back to the revolver. The one which has the match, or probably the highest match, will help the department to prove that this is the actual revolver which was used to fire this bullet. Right? We have an analogous problem in the digital domain. There is a picture, right, a snap, which is associated with a particular crime. It has been later on found out, right? So people did not bother to use a very sophisticated watermarking technique or a watermarking chip to ensure that if later on, if it is found that, well, this image is related to a crime, then I can prove that, prove or disprove that my camera was used to capture this image. Nobody predicted that, right? And in the process, what happened? The image later on, it was found out that the image has been captured by one of these three cameras. Now, how can you prove that yes, out of these three cameras, this one is the one which captured it? How will you prove it? What is needed here? We can model this as this. So this is called the source identification problem, the forensic problem of source identification. So you can use the headers, right? Every camera sensor would generate certain header. This header information will be there embedded in the image. That can be used to map the image back to the camera. But again, the attacker will not be this much foolish. Chopping off that header is extremely one-step operation, right? Extremely easy operation. Now, if the header is chopped off, then there is no trivial way to map the image back to its source. Again, you need some complex analysis techniques by which, based on a post-processing operation, you can map the image to its source. Right? So this in forensic field is modeled many times as a classification problem. Okay. So what we do is we model this problem as a classification problem. So we basically use every camera as a class. We model every camera as a class, and we collect n number of samples from every class. The samples are shown here on the right. From every camera, you capture, with every camera, you capture, say, 100 images. And then train your classifier with the features from those 100 images from every class. The classifier is trained. Use the trained classifier to extract features from this test image now. This contentious image poses as the test image now. So use the trained model to predict the class of this test sample. And people have obtained quite good accuracy by posing this problem as a classification problem. Right. So this particular problem is possibly one of the most relevant problems which are drawing a lot of which is drawing a lot of research attention in today's date. More so given the fact that uh, digital evidences have become the primary sources of evidence. Previously, what was there? Previously, so this stuff has been collected from the sources which are there. I have just provided the URL to these sources from where I have collected these facts. So it's basically what's done is a case study on usage of legal evidences. Right. So previously, only physical documents could be submitted as primary evidences to the court of law. But now, almost all countries have changed their laws on electronic evidences. And electronic evidences, such as digital documents, PDFs, and images, videos, audio files. These previously were considered as secondary sources of evidence. So they can accompany, they will make the case stronger, but not primary. The entire case, the proceedings cannot be based on only these electronic evidences. Previously, this was the scenario, but now the scenario has changed. The scenario is getting changed almost over all nations. You can go and you can read the source here. They have explained, they have provided these facts very nicely. So what they are doing, the countries are doing, is that they are changing their laws pertaining to the importance or significance of electronic evidences. And presently the scenario is that in almost all nations, including our nation, India, starting 2000, following the IT Act 2000, the laws were amended to allow for the admissibility of digital evidences as primary sources, right? So that in court of law, the electronic evidences can be considered to be part of primary evidence, right? So they are gaining, the point is that electronic evidences are gaining importance as days are passing by. But of course, there are certain added formalities which should be performed as compared to physical documents or physical evidences, right? What are those? This is our area of interest. In the court of law, if an electronic evidence is submitted, some tests, additional tests, need to be affirmed before they can be considered viable. What are those? Is the information relevant? Now, this does not have anything to do with forensic tests. This is true for all. Is it authentic? Is it original or duplicate? Right. Authentic means is the source that it's claiming to have come from. Has it actually come from that source? Or in other words, is it authentic? Second, is it original or duplicate? Right. So this first problem, whether the source authentication is successful or not, the answer is source device identification. Source camera or source device identification. Let us talk in terms of digital image forensics. The same holds for digital video as well as audio forensics. Because I have worked mostly with images and videos somewhat. So I have taken up the example of images. Right. So it's basically source device identification, not camera. Camera is too specific. To keep it general, it should have been source device identification, right? This answers the first question. The forensic techniques would help the court to answer the first question. The second one, there are lots of problems involving, I told you, doctored image generation, right? So they will deal with the second problem. So this is the idea of the fourth forensic problem that we are going to see in this lecture. Now, related to this, you might have noticed that related to this particular investigation, there is a very strong requirement. If you have guessed it correctly, the requirement is that I have shown 3 cameras here. So the owners of these 3 cameras, they need to cooperate with the analysis process, right? Or the investigation process. They should agree to it. They should agree to give you the camera for a day or two so that you can capture those many images. What if they deny? They are innocent until proven guilty. So you being the forensic investigator, cannot force them to give their device to you. And they have the full freedom to deny that I am not going to give you my camera for whatever your investigation is. And you need to take care of this, because most forensic investigations, they deal with legal operations. Finally, it's at the end of the day, this is all about cyber crimes detection. The practical applicability is cyber crime detection. And this is a very practical scenario possibility that a person is not willing to hand over the device to the investigators. What will happen? So it's a form of unknown model, a model or a device which is not accessible. If the device is not accessible, you don't have the samples. Is it possible to still identify that this image has not come from these accessible cameras, but from a different source? So there are 3 persons who are willing to give you the camera, and there is a 4th person who is not. Can you prove that this image actually has come from this not accessible source? Also, if there are multiple such parties who are not providing their cameras to you, can you distinctly identify or answer 2 questions? Number 1, how many such non-accessible devices are there? Number 2, out of all these devices, which one is the correct source? A very tough problem. Very recently, some works have come up in this area as well. We have published one of our works in this domain also last year. So if you search with unknown models detection, you can find out this kind of works. You will find very limited, because this is a very new field and a lot of work is needed here as well, right? So the idea is to map a particular image to its source. The idea is to map the image to the camera fingerprints, right? Every camera would have a sensor, whether it is your mobile camera or point and shoot camera or your DSLR. If it is a digital camera, it would have a sensor, right? Specific to the sensor, you can extract, so people succeeded to extract fingerprints and the image noise residual. And it was found that the sensor fingerprint and noise residual strongly match if the image actually was captured by this sensor. So the idea is, see, this is completely post-processing. Okay, do not these pre-processing steps, this term pre-processing means something else. kind of steps performed before the actual investigation. But the crime already has happened before all this analysis has started, right? So do not assume this pre-processing, don't confuse this pre-processing with the ones you saw in watermarking and steganography slides. Okay, so this is completely post-processing only. So before we start actual investigation, we have to do certain homework. That is what we mean by pre-processing here. What we do, we collect few images per camera. For each such sample, we denoise it. We collect the noise residual. Okay. After denoising, we extract the noise and we collect the noise residual. We take an average of all noise, and this gives you a sensor pattern noise. Sorry. This gives you this average of all image noises, gives you a sensor pattern noise for the camera. Okay. Empirically, we find a threshold of cross correlation. This is nothing but a measure to correlate. Cross correlation, the same cross correlation measures which we see in statistics, right? So we correlate the image noise with the sensor pattern noise. If the match is beyond a certain threshold, we say that the image was actually captured. How is this done? Here is the test case. Find the noise residual of the validation or the test image. Calculate cross correlation. Let us say we take the NCC measure, normalized cross correlation measure. Between what? The noise residual of this validation image I and the sensor pattern noise of each camera. For each camera, if this cross correlation measure exceeds the threshold of the camera, you see, for every camera, we have found a threshold. So if it is beyond the threshold, then we say that the image I has been captured with camera C. In other words, attribute image I with camera C. This is the pre-processing, this is the homework stage, and this is the actual investigation or source attribution stage. Okay. This is the basic idea of fingerprinting, right? We can also view it as a classification task. I have already told this to you, so I won't repeat. Every camera is a particular class, model or class. Extract the features, train your classifier. And then when the test image comes, you have to find out which device it has come from or which class it belongs to. Extract the features, feed to your trained classifier, and it says with certain probability that which of the models it belongs to, which of the classes this unknown sample belongs to. Right, so we can view it as a classification model as well. So there are both these operating principles, fingerprint based and classification feature based. Fingerprint based and feature based techniques are there for solving the forensic problem of source device identification. Right? So possibly this is the last thing that I plan to cover in this lecture. This is all about counter forensics. We till now have seen a lot of information. We have seen a lot of technical stuff about what is this new branch of digital forensics. We have learned about how it differs from the traditional concerns, security concerns, and what are the open problems. Now, the discussion should not end here. There is another step forward, which is the recent development of counter forensics. Now, this counter forensic is nothing but attacks against forensic techniques. Techniques to counter the state-of-the-art forensic measures. So counter forensics, many times called as anti-forensics, is a branch of science that deals with misleading or bypassing the existing forensic techniques to detect the presence of attacks in a given scenario. Counter forensics challenge the existing forensic methods of forgery detection. They assess their limitations. So this might be done with a malicious intention by attackers just to make the forensic investigations completely ineffective, to mislead a forensic analyst. With that intention, this counter forensic techniques might be studied or employed. It might also help you, it will also helps you to improve and strengthen the existing forensic techniques. Right. Just like ethical hacking. Why is ethical hacking performed? So that the security measures are even strengthened. They are strengthened even further. Right. On similar lines, counter forensic branch helps to make, when done with an ethical motto, it helps to make the forensic branch even more strong. Right. So just to give you an idea, I would not delve deep into this particular topic. So yeah, this slide. Seam carving, for example, is a counter forensic attack. We have seen that to attribute an image to its source, what's done is we compute the noise residual for hundreds of images. We take the average of it and it serves the purpose of, it serves as the sensor pattern noise. Now simply what a person might do, an attacker might do, is that just modify some of the images in such a way that the pattern noise extraction is now not no more accurate. Immediately, even if it is a correct source, the source to image mapping, it falls much less than 100. So seam carving, it is a content aware image resizing approach. Content aware image resizing. It disturbs the photo response non-uniformity noise. Right. So this is noise content which we were extracting and then averaging. So it disturbs the PRNU content of an image, photo response non-uniformity noise of an image through image resizing. You can simply resize the image, but it does not do that simple image resizing. It performs a content-aware image resizing. Basically, it removes seams of the image. Seam is a connected path of pixels with least variation from the surroundings. Right. So if this kind of a seam, a path of pixels, connected path of pixels, but least varying from the surrounding you extract, it is very tough to find out that that path of pixels has been extracted because it was very low correlated to its surrounding. So even if you remove it, does not change much in the quality, visual quality of the image. A vertical seam connects pixels from top to bottom with horizontal offset of plus minus 1. 0 plus 1 or minus 1. Right. So it's basically moving this way, then this way, possibly. Right. Over the pixel submatrix. Right. So this is a vertical seam. You are moving vertically. So connected path of pixels least varied from its surroundings. You extract it, it does not have any effect on the perceptual quality, but destroys the inherent noise pattern. And once you remove it, it is irreversible loss to the image. You cannot find or predict these pixels back from whatever is left. Remember, the correlation with the surroundings was very minimal. So looking at the surrounding pixels or neighboring pixels, you can never predict its value correctly. So this loss becomes irreversible. This loss destroys the inherent noise pattern of the image, but at the same time, the visual quality is unaffected, at least perceptually. So this is one of the first and foremost ways of techniques of counter forensic attacks that were delivered, and there are lots more, like fingerprint copy attack, then adaptive peer review denoising. If you grow interest in this field is extremely new, and you can look up these terms: adaptive APD, fingerprint copy attack, seam curving, and you will get a very clear idea how these help you to achieve counter forensics, right? So we had also done a work on counter forensics, and we proposed a way to detect counter forensic attacks, but I won't discuss it here. If you are interested, I can uh, give some pointers offline. So with that, I shall stop my talk here with a thanks to the organizers and all the audience. These are some of my references. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ruchira Noskar, for your nice talk. Thank you so much from organizer side, from my side, for accepting my invitation to give such a nice lecture. Thank you all. And now I will take certain question or interaction. First, I will go to Dr. Raja Shekhar. Please ask question.
Okay.
Dr. Raja Shekhar, please ask question.
Yeah, ma'am. Very good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Ma'am, I am having a small doubt. What are the specific tools that I can do the activities that are explained by you, ma'am? Any specific tools? Because I have a banking domain knowledge of 13 years. If at all, if I want to switch over to the cyber security concern with my exposure, last classes also I have raised my concern. I am an expert in Python, ma'am. So if at all, if I want to make use of a Python programming language relating to cyber security, what are the best tools I can utilize or use?
Okay. So thank you for your question, sir. In this talk, basically, I have tried to give an idea about what are the open problems, but I have not spoken much about what are the techniques which are in practice.
Okay.
But I think at some points I gave you certain ideas about the algorithms that are there, like the ghost image detection in JPEG specific forensics, and then you have certain. If you have knowledge in Python, then basically machine learning algorithms
Yes.
are your answers, right? So
You
if
mean
you
to say
have
that deep learning?
deep learning, also your traditional non-deep learning machine learning techniques, where the features are very important. I told you that in source identification, you see it can be modeled as a classification task, right? Image features are very important, and image features are known. People have already found out what features might help you.
Correct.
Then again, in counter forensics, people are not yet clear about what the features might be useful. So in those cases, you go for deep learning techniques where automatic feature engineering is performed. If you speak about already existing tools, exact tools, I don't have much idea of, because we work on algorithms. We don't work with tools directly, but yes, one or two tools which are not specific to forensics, but they will help you to do some kind of forensic analysis. I mentioned one that is Wireshark. sophisticated version of Ethereal. So if you analyze the packets that are flowing out, these also are used by many forensic analysts.
Okay. 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 Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more question? I think there is no more question. So thank you, Professor Ruchira Noskar, once again for your kind consent to accept our invitation for the lecture. Thank you. Oh,
Sir, just a minute, sir. There is query.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, you can go ahead with
Yes,
question,
ma'am. Ma'am, thanks for giving your open challenges available in this stream, ma'am. It was very interesting. Can you just throw some light on like what are the different alternatives or solutions for image like move? You said some subspace of the image being copied there. Some sort of encryption being done or duplication is being done. So can you just throw some light there, like what are the different algorithms we can refer for?
Yes, yes. So you can look at exact matching approach, you can look at exhaustive search approach, robust matching approach, autocorrelation based approach. So basic idea is, what I understand is you are talking about region duplication attack, where
Yes,
a particular region of an image is repeated to obscure some significant objects or repeat some significant objects. So till now, whatever techniques have been devised, they have one commonality. I shall tell you the commonality. Then there are sophistications and tweakings here and there. The commonality is the entire image is divided into blocks, right? Now, size of the block again is empirical parameter. And once you divide it into blocks, you do a search on the space of blocks available. And there is a certain threshold. Let us say 10, right? So if 10 neighboring or connected blocks, two different subsets of these match together, it is highly probable that they are part of copied and moved or duplicated regions within the image. Are you getting the idea?
Yes,
so it is right. So it's not a single block matching, but it's a group of block matching. Otherwise, it will throw a lot of false positives, right? So single block matching is not a very good idea, but a set of connected blocks, if you match and you find there are two such or three such, probably it's very probable that there has been a region duplication. That is commonality in all of the techniques.
Thank you, ma'am. Why? Because it's an open challenge nowadays in WhatsApp. We get so many images with where we are not able to identify the genuinity of it. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any more question? Any more question from the participants? Okay, then once again, thank you. And with your due permission, I am closing the session. Thank you, Professor Ruchira.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to all the audience. And thank you for inviting me once again. Thank you.